A humble lady was humiliated at work. Then her billionaire husband walked in and fired everyone. The soda can hit her arm before she even heard it leave Gabrielle's hand. Cherry red, ice cold. It exploded against her sleeve and sprayed across her keyboard, her reports, her face. The fizz hissed against the silence like a fuse being lit. Vivienne did not scream. She did not cry. She stood up slowly, the red liquid dripping from her elbow onto the tile floor, and she looked around the room at every single person who was watching and doing nothing. Then she looked at the broken thermos on the ground, the one her husband had given her. The glass was cracked down the center, and the handwritten words on the label were bleeding through the liquid. "You are the bravest person I know." She picked it up. She placed it gently on her desk. And she looked at the woman who threw the can with a gaze so still, so deep, that for one flickering second, Gabrielle Fontaine looked afraid. "You think I do not belong here," Vivienne said quietly. Gabrielle opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "You might be right." Then Vivienne turned and walked out of that office. She did not run, she did not cry, she just walked. And behind her, the laughter that had chased her for months went silent for the first time. But here is the part they did not know, the part that would change everything. The quiet woman in the second-hand cardigan, the one they mocked for her shoes and her homemade lunches and her invisible life, was married to one of the most powerful men on the eastern seaboard, and he was already standing in the hallway, waiting. Not with lawyers, not with threats, with something far more dangerous. Patience and a plan. If this story does not grip your heart by the end, nothing will. So sit back, breathe, and let me take you to the beginning. Hello, family. Welcome to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis. If you are new here, please subscribe and tap the like button. It means the world to us. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. Turn on your notifications so you never miss a new one. Thank you. Now, let us begin. 6 months earlier. The revolving doors of Pinnacle Brand Group exhaled a gust of recycled air as Vivienne Okafor stepped into the lobby. It was 7:43 in the morning. Early. Earlier than anyone else on the analytics floor. That was intentional. Vivienne liked the quiet. She liked the way the office felt before the noise arrived. Before the performance began. Her flat shoes, sensible, dark, scuffed slightly at the toe, made almost no sound against the polished marble. She moved the way she always moved through that building. Carefully. Invisibly. Like a woman walking through a room full of sleeping wolves. The office was designed to intimidate. That was the first thing you noticed. Polished steel beams arched overhead like the ribs of something massive and cold. A slate waterfall feature whispered behind the front desk, filling the lobby with a sound that was supposed to be calming but always felt like a warning. The company logo, Pinnacle, was etched in brushed chrome across the back wall in letters tall enough to cast shadows. Everything in the space was curated. The furniture, the lighting, even the plants were fake, because real ones required too much care and not enough control. And then there was Vivienne. She wore a soft olive cardigan that morning. It was the kind of thing you would find on a sale rack, folded between forgotten sweaters in a department store basement. Underneath it, a simple white cotton blouse with faint blue pinstripes. Her trousers were dark, pressed neatly, hemmed just above her ankles. Her hair was pulled into a low twist at the back of her neck, held together with a tortoiseshell clip her daughter had given her 3 years ago for Mother's Day. There were no highlights in her hair, no designer label on her collar, no statement piece, no performance. She was not there to be noticed. She was there to work. Her desk sat at the far end of the open-plan floor, tucked into a corner near the fire exit, beside an air conditioning vent that rattled every 40 seconds and had never been repaired. It was the desk they gave you when they wanted you to understand your place. When they wanted to say, without saying, that you were not important enough for a window. Not visible enough for the center. Not worth the effort of pretending otherwise. Vivienne set down her canvas tote bag, the one with the fraying shoulder strap that she kept meaning to replace but never did, and began arranging her things the way she always did. Laptop open, tilted at a precise angle, notepad aligned to the left, a single pen placed horizontally above it like a border. And last, from the bottom of the bag, she pulled out a thermos. It was not new, it was not expensive. It was stainless steel, slightly dented near the base, where it had rolled off the kitchen counter one morning when their daughter was running through the house. But it was warm in her hands, and the label on its side, written in her husband's neat, unhurried handwriting, read, "You are the bravest person I know." She traced the words with her thumb. She did that every morning. It was not a ritual she had planned. It had just become one, the way certain gestures do when they are the only soft thing in a hard day. She tucked the thermos into her drawer and turned to the screen. Numbers. Clean, logical, beautiful numbers. Data sets arranged in columns. Trend lines rising and falling like the breath of something alive. Behavioral patterns mapped across months. This was where Vivienne disappeared, not into hiding, but into focus, into the one place where the noise could not reach her. She had a gift for it. She always had. Back in graduate school at Northwestern, her thesis advisor, a woman named Dr. Adelaide Fairbanks, had pulled her aside after a particularly complex statistical review and said, "Vivienne, you do not just read data. You listen to it. Most people look at a spreadsheet and see rows. You hear a symphony." That was 14 years ago. She still remembered the warmth in that woman's voice. The way it made her feel seen, truly seen, not for what she wore or who she was married to, but for what her mind could do. Here, at Pinnacle, no one saw that. No one wanted to. Here, she was the quiet one, the woman who packed her own lunch, the woman who rode the bus, the woman who wore cardigans from clearance bins and never posted on social media, and never raised her voice in meetings even when her ideas were sharper than anyone else's in the room. Here, she was invisible, and for a long time she had told herself that was fine. She sipped from her thermos, ginger tea. Julian brewed it for her every morning before she left. He would stand at the kitchen island in their home, barefoot, sleeves rolled to his elbows, pressing fresh ginger through a steel mesh strainer with the same hands that had signed billion-dollar acquisition deals. And he would pour into her thermos without a word, cap it, and set it beside her bag by the door, every single morning. She never asked him to. He never stopped. The office began to fill around 8:15. The elevator chimed. Heels clicked against tile. Voices rose in layers, greetings and gossip, and the synthetic buzz of people performing their importance for one another. And then came the sound Vivienne dreaded most. Not a shout, not a crash, just laughter. That particular kind of laughter. The kind that is not meant to share joy. The kind that is shaped like a weapon and aimed like one too. Gabrielle Fontaine arrived the way she always did, like a weather system. You felt her before you saw her. Her voice entered the room half a hallway ahead of her body, and by the time she was at her desk, everyone within a 30-foot radius had adjusted their posture, their volume, their attention. She was tall, auburn hair that fell in deliberate waves over a charcoal blazer that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her nails were always done. Her smile was always ready. And behind it, behind the gloss and the confidence and the curated elegance, was something sharp and restless, something that needed to be fed. Beside her, as always, stood Derek Holt, broad-shouldered, square-jawed, the kind of man who confused volume with authority and cruelty with wit. He laughed too loud at everything Gabrielle said. He agreed with her opinions before she finished stating them. He was not her friend. He was her echo. And echoes do not think for themselves. And then there was Sloane Whitfield. Sloane was quieter than the other two, but in some ways more dangerous. She did not throw punches. She filmed them. Her phone was always in her hand, always angled, always recording. She turned other people's pain into content and called it comedy. She was the archivist of cruelty, and she never missed a frame. The three of them together formed something the rest of the office understood instinctively. Not a team, a hierarchy, a court. And everyone who worked on that floor had learned, quickly and quietly, which side of that court it was safe to stand on. Vivienne was not on any side. She was beneath it. That morning, the first comment came at 8:32. Vivienne knew the time because her screen clock was in the corner of her monitor, and she had trained herself to notice the exact moment the day turned hostile. It was a survival instinct, the way animals learn to read the wind before a predator arrives. "Oh my God," Gabrielle said, loud enough for the entire bullpen to hear. She was leaning against the edge of Sloane's desk, holding a matcha latte in one hand and gesturing with the other. Did anyone else see the shoes today? I mean, I am not being mean, I am being concerned. Those are the shoes of a woman who has given up on life. Derek snorted. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Hey, not everyone has a Nordstrom account. Let the woman have her beige moment. Sloane tilted her phone screen toward them, giggling behind her hand. I am making a series. Office fashion emergencies. She is the whole season. Vivian's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She did not look up. She had trained herself not to. A reaction was currency to them. Eye contact was an invitation. Even a flinch was a reward. And she refused to pay. But the words landed anyway. They always did. Not like punches. Paper cuts. Tiny. Accumulating. Invisible to anyone who was not bleeding from them. She sipped her ginger tea. She kept typing. And she told herself, the way she had told herself every morning for the past 2 years, that it did not matter. That the work mattered. That the numbers mattered. That if she just kept her head down and her hands moving, the noise would eventually lose interest and find someone else to feed on. But it never did. By Tuesday of that same week, the temperature inside the office had shifted. Not the thermostat. The energy. There was something electric in the air, something predatory, like the low hum of a frequency only certain people can hear. The ones being hunted. Vivian felt it before she understood it. The whispers were louder. The glances lasted longer. There was a new edge to the laughter, a hunger in it that had not been there before, as if something in the group had been activated, as if they had decided, collectively and without discussion, that it was time to escalate. It started small. It always does. Tuesday morning, Gabrielle stood at the coffee station, stirring her drink slowly, her back to the room, but her voice pitched perfectly to Carrie. Honestly, if I had to eat lunch from a plastic container every single day, I think I would resign on the spot. What is the point of showing up if you cannot even afford a salad bar? Derek, 2 desks away, did not even look up from his screen. I heard she takes the bus. The bus. In this city. Like we are living in some kind of documentary about survival. Sloane's voice was quieter but sharper. She leaned in toward Derek with the precision of someone who knew exactly where to place a blade. I saw her reheating lentil soup in the break room yesterday. The whole floor smelled like a shelter kitchen. Vivian had eaten lentil soup in the break room the day before, her mother's recipe. The one with cumin and roasted tomatoes and a pinch of smoked paprika that made the whole kitchen at home smell like a Sunday afternoon in her childhood. She had carried it in a glass container that morning, tucked carefully in her tote beside her notebook, and she had sat alone at the small table by the window and eaten it in silence while the rest of the office ordered delivery and pretended she did not exist. She bit the inside of her cheek and forced her eyes back to the screen. By Wednesday, the attacks had moved from words to action. That afternoon, Vivian was called into a quarterly review meeting on the 9th floor. She gathered her notebook and her pen and walked out of the bullpen without speaking to anyone. She was gone for an hour and 14 minutes. When she returned, she stopped in front of her desk and did not move. Her chair was pushed sideways. A pale brown puddle of iced coffee had spread across the entire surface of her workspace. It soaked through a full stack of printed reports she had spent 4 days preparing. It had bled into the margins of her handwritten notes, turning the ink into unreadable blue rivers. And at the center of the mess, face down in the liquid, was her leather-bound notebook. Julian had given it to her on their 10th anniversary. It was not an expensive gift by his standards. He could have bought her anything. A car. A bracelet, a house. But he had chosen that notebook because he knew what it would mean to her. Inside the front cover, in his handwriting, he had written, "For the thoughts too important for a screen." The ink was gone. The pages were warped and swollen. The leather cover was stained beyond repair. Vivian stood completely still. Her eyes moved across the damage the way a detective surveys a crime scene. Slowly, deliberately, recording every detail. Behind her, Gabrielle's voice floated over like perfume laced with poison. "Oh no, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I was walking past and my heel caught on the carpet and my entire drink just went everywhere. I am such a disaster." She held the empty cup in her hand the way someone holds a microphone after a punchline, loosely, proudly. Derek poked his head over the cubicle wall and let out a long whistle. "Yikes! That looks expensive. Well, you know. Relative to her budget. Sloane already had her phone up. She was filming. Of course she was filming. Monday content, she murmured. Her lips barely moved, but the camera was steady. Vivienne said nothing. She walked to the supply closet at the end of the hallway. She pulled a roll of paper towels from the shelf. She walked back to her desk, and she cleaned it herself, every drop, every soaked page, every ruined word. They watched her, all three of them, the way children watch an insect under a magnifying glass, fascinated, detached, entertained by the smallness of another living thing suffering. And nobody else moved. Not the project lead 2 desks away who had heard the entire exchange. Not the operations manager who glanced over from the printer and then looked back at her documents as if complicity could be forgiven through busyness. Not Amy, the HR intern, fresh out of college, who watched from behind her laptop screen with wide eyes and a clenched jaw and said absolutely nothing. That was the real sickness, not the bullies, the silence that fed them. Vivienne dropped the last wad of soaked paper towels into the wastebasket. She sat down. She opened her laptop. And she continued working. But her hands were not steady. And for the first time in months, there was something behind her eyes that had not been there before. Not tears. Something hotter. Something slower. A current running deep beneath the surface, building pressure in a place no one could see. That evening, long after the office had emptied, Vivienne sat alone at her desk. The overhead lights had dimmed to their automatic evening setting, casting everything in a soft amber glow. The city skyline burned through the tall windows, towers of glass and steel, lit from within, rising into a sky that could not decide if it was night or something darker. The coffee stain was gone, but the ghost of it remained, a faint discoloration on the surface of her desk, a watermark no amount of paper towels could erase. She stared at the ruined notebook in her lap. She opened it to the first page. Julian's handwriting was still barely visible beneath the damage. For the thoughts too important for a screen. She closed it. She placed it in her bag. And she sat there for a long time, watching the lights of the city flicker like a conversation she could not quite hear. She was not angry, not yet, but deep inside, beneath the layers of patience and restraint and all the years of choosing silence over confrontation, something was shifting. Something tectonic. The kind of movement that happens slowly, invisibly, until the day the ground cracks open and the landscape is never the same again. Thursday brought something worse than insults. It brought theft. Vivienne had spent the past 3 weeks building a behavioral analytics model for one of the firm's largest clients, Belrose Cosmetics. It was meticulous work. She had identified a critical flaw in the company's customer segmentation strategy, a blind spot that was costing them hundreds of thousands in misdirected ad spend every quarter. Her solution was elegant. A restructured targeting framework built on microbehavioral data clusters that no one else in the department had thought to isolate. She had documented everything, the methodology, the projections, the supporting data. She had formatted it into a clean, comprehensive report and saved it on the shared drive under her name. Thursday morning, she arrived at her desk at 7:45. She opened her laptop, she navigated to the shared drive, and the file was gone. Not deleted, moved, renamed, and reassigned. At 9:15, a company-wide email went out from the communications team announcing that Gabrielle Fontaine would be presenting a groundbreaking new analytics strategy to the Belrose Cosmetics team that afternoon. Attached to the email was a summary document. Vivienne opened it. It was her work, every word, every chart, every data point. The only thing that had changed was the name on the cover page. Vivienne read the document 3 times. She did not blink. She did not move. She sat perfectly still in her chair while the office hummed around her, while people congratulated Gabrielle on her brilliant work, while Derek slapped the desk and said, "This is why you are the best, G," while Sloane posted a story about it to the company's internal social channel with the caption, "Queen Things." No one looked at Vivienne. No one even remembered that the data had come from her corner of the floor. She was invisible, and invisible people do not get credit. They get erased. That afternoon, she watched through the glass wall of the conference room as Gabrielle stood at the front of the table and presented the Belrose strategy to a room full of executives. She watched Gabrielle smile. She watched Gabrielle gesture confidently at charts that Vivienne had built line by line. Late into the night, alone at her desk while the rest of the office was home watching television. She watched, and she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel in that building before. Not sadness, not resignation, rage. It moved through her like a wave of heat, rising from somewhere deep in her stomach and flooding upward through her chest, her throat, her jaw. She clenched her teeth so tightly her molars ached, her vision blurred at the edges. Her hands pressed flat against the surface of her desk, fingers splayed, as if she were trying to hold herself to the earth. But she did not move. She did not speak. She swallowed the fire the way she had swallowed every fire before it, and she turned back to her screen and opened a new spreadsheet. Because that is what Vivienne Okafor did. She endured. She absorbed. She swallowed the fire and smiled through the smoke, and kept her hands moving and her voice low and her heart locked behind a door she never opened at work. That night she sat in her car in the parking structure for 27 minutes before she could bring herself to drive home. She did not cry. Crying would have been a relief. Instead, she just sat there, with her hands on the steering wheel, and her forehead pressed against the leather and the engine off, and the silence pressing in from every side like deep water. When she finally walked through the front door, Julian was in the kitchen. He looked up. He saw her face. He did not ask what happened. He already knew, not the details. The shape of it. The weight. He had been watching her carry it for months, and every night she came home a little more hollowed out, a little quieter, like a lantern with the flame turning lower and lower. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms without a word. She let him hold her, but she did not soften. Her body stayed rigid. Her jaw stayed clenched. She was holding herself together at home with the same force she used at work, and she did not know how to turn it off. Julian pressed his lips against the top of her head. His voice was barely a whisper. "How much longer, Viv?" She did not answer. She could not. Because the honest answer was one she was not ready to say out loud. Not yet. But even endurance has a limit, and hers was closer than anyone, including herself, knew. If you are feeling this story right now, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been invisible in a room full of people who should have seen you? Drop a heart in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this. And make sure you are subscribed, because what happens next, you do not want to miss. Friday arrived the way a held breath finally leaves the body. Slowly, heavily, with the weight of everything that had been building behind it. The sky over the city was the color of wet concrete. Low clouds pressed against the tops of the downtown towers like a ceiling that had dropped too far. Rain had begun sometime before dawn, and by the time Vivienne stepped off the bus at 7:31, the sidewalks were slick and shining, and the air smelled like metal and wet stone. She liked the rain. She always had. There was something honest about it. The way it did not pretend. The way it fell without apology and left the world looking different afterward. Cleaner. Rawer. As if the sky had been holding something for too long and had finally decided to let it go. Inside Pinnacle Brand Group, there was no such honesty. The bullpen crackled with a reckless, almost manic energy that Friday morning. Someone had ordered pastries from a bakery downtown and was distributing them with surgical exclusion, walking past certain desks without stopping, offering others 2 and 3 with exaggerated generosity. Gabrielle was already in her seat, nails freshly lacquered a deep violet burgundy, her phone propped against her monitor playing a podcast about personal branding. Derek was telling a story too loudly about a club he had been to over the weekend, making sure every detail landed with maximum performance. Sloane was filming something. She was always filming something. Vivienne sat at her desk. She opened her laptop. She pulled up the report she had been rebuilding from scratch since Thursday afternoon. 3 weeks of work, stolen. Now she was starting over. But this one, she kept on a private drive. Password protected. Backed up to her personal cloud. She would not make the same mistake twice. The morning passed slowly. Or maybe it did not. Time had started to feel strange to her that week. The hours stretched when she was alone and compressed when the noise started. Like her internal clock had been rewired to measure her day not in minutes, but in intervals between attacks. She finished a section of the report. She saved it. She reached into her drawer for her thermos. The ginger tea was lukewarm now, but she drank it anyway, The taste of it grounded her. "Julian. Home. The kitchen island." His hands pressing ginger through the strainer, the steam rising from the kettle in the early light. She closed her eyes for 1 second, just one. And then it happened. It was fast, so fast that her brain did not process the sound until the sensation had already registered. A sharp crack of aluminum against skin, then cold. Biting, sudden cold, spreading down her right arm, soaking through the sleeve of her cardigan, bleeding across her desk in a red wave. A can of cherry soda rolled to a stop beside her mousepad, still fizzing. Vivienne gasped. She flinched backward in her chair, her hand flying to her soaked arm. The red liquid was everywhere. On her keyboard, on her reports, on the edge of her screen. It dripped from her elbow onto the tile floor in a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Across from her, Gabrielle stood with her hand still half extended. Her posture was relaxed. Her face was arranged into an expression of amused surprise, the way someone looks when they have rehearsed a reaction so many times it has become second nature. "Oops," Gabrielle said. She tilted her head slightly, the way a cat does when it is deciding whether to play with something or kill it. "Thought you could use a little color in your life. You are welcome." Vivienne stood up slowly. The room went still. Not silent, still, like the air before lightning. Like the forest before the first crack of a branch underfoot. Everyone was watching. Everyone had stopped pretending to work. Derek let out a sharp snort from his desk. "Relax, it is just a joke. Do not be so dramatic." Sloane was already recording. Her phone was steady, her angle precise. She zoomed in on Vivienne's dripping sleeve, her shocked face, the puddle spreading across the desk. "Oh, this is gold," she whispered. "Say goodbye to your dignity." Vivienne's heart was pounding. She could feel it in her temples, in her wrists, behind her eyes. Her hands trembled at her sides. The soda was cold against her skin, and the smell of artificial cherry filled her nostrils, and everything, every sensation, every sound, every pair of eyes locked onto her, felt amplified, like someone had turned the volume of the world all the way up. She looked around the room, slowly, carefully, taking in every face. The project lead across the aisle, pretending to read an email, the operations manager, by the printer, stacking paper she did not need. Amy from HR, frozen behind her laptop, lips parted, eyes wide, doing nothing, saying nothing. No one moved, no one spoke. The silence was not neutral, it was a choice. Every person in that room who looked away or stayed seated or pressed their lips together and pretended not to see, they were all making a choice. And the choice was complicity. Then Derek leaned forward and kicked the leg of her chair with his foot. It jerked sideways. Papers slid from her desk. Her thermos, Julian's thermos, tipped off the edge and hit the tile floor with a sharp crack. The glass lining shattered. Ginger tea pooled across the white tile in a golden stain. The dented steel body rolled once and stopped. And through the cracked glass, the handwritten label was still visible, the ink bleeding but the words unmistakable. "You are the bravest person I know." Sloane howled. She actually howled with laughter, her phone shaking slightly as she tried to keep the frame steady. Gabrielle stepped forward, close enough that Vivienne could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp. She leaned in, and her voice dropped to a whisper that was designed to feel like a blade pressed against bare skin. "You do not belong here. This is not a charity. Go back to wherever it is you came from." Vivienne did not move. She could not. Her feet were rooted to the floor. Her fists were clenched so tightly that her nails had broken the skin of her palms. She could feel the warm sting of it, the tiny crescents of pain, and somehow it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the moment. The room waited. The clock on the far wall ticked. The rain outside hissed against the windows. The air conditioning vent beside her desk rattled its 40-second rattle. And then something shifted. It was not visible, not to anyone watching. There was no dramatic moment, no cinematic turn of the head, no swelling orchestral score. It was internal. A door closing quietly inside her, a latch falling into place. A decision made not in anger, but in absolute, terrifying clarity. She bent down and picked up the broken thermos. She held it in both hands, feeling the cracked glass shift inside the steel shell. She placed it gently on her desk. She straightened her back. She pulled her soaked cardigan sleeve away from her skin, and she looked at Gabrielle. No smile, no mask. No performance of strength or weakness or anything in between. Just a look. A long, steady, unblinking look that went through Gabrielle's carefully constructed exterior like light through glass. Gabrielle faltered. It lasted half a second. Maybe less. But it was enough. For one tiny, unguarded moment, the most powerful woman on the floor looked uncertain. And Vivienne saw it. "You think I do not belong here," Vivienne said. Her voice was quiet, calm, the calmest sound in a room full of people holding their breath. Gabrielle's mouth opened. Nothing came. "You might be right." The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. They did not splash, they sank. And the ripples spread outward in every direction, touching every desk, every face, every corner of that room. Then Vivienne turned. She did not hurry. She did not stumble. She picked up her bag. She walked past the desks, past the glass partitions, past the chrome logo on the lobby wall that had once made her feel so small. She pushed through the double doors and stepped into the gray corridor, and she did not look back. Behind her, the laughter did not resume. The whispers did not restart. The room stayed exactly as she had left it, suspended, unfinished, like a sentence that had been cut off before the most important word. And none of them noticed the man standing just around the corner. He was tall, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples. His overcoat was charcoal, unbuttoned, damp from the rain outside. His jaw was set in a line so hard it could have been carved from the same stone as the building itself. His hands were in his pockets. His breathing was steady. But his eyes were burning with something that had no name. Julian Okafor had been standing there for 11 minutes. He had heard everything, the laughter, the insults, the sound of the can hitting his wife's arm, the crack of the thermos against the floor. He had not moved, he had not intervened, because she had asked him not to. Months ago, sitting across from him at their kitchen table, she had looked into his eyes and said, "Please, Julian, let me do this on my own. Let me prove I can stand without your shadow falling over me." And he had honored that, every day, for 2 years. But as he watched her walk toward him now, her cardigan stained red, her eyes dry but devastated, her hands still shaking at her sides, something inside him shifted too. Vivienne met his gaze, and for the first time that day, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she exhaled. He did not embrace her. He did not speak. He simply stepped forward, placed one hand gently on the back of her neck, and stood with her in the silence of that empty corridor while the rain drummed against the windows and the world outside kept moving as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. Something enormous, something that could not be undone, something that had been building in the silence for 2 years and had finally, quietly, irreversibly, cracked through the surface. Vivienne Okafor had spent 730 days making herself smaller, dimming her own light so that others would not feel threatened by it, folding herself into corners and swallowing words and absorbing cruelty like it was rain and she was the earth. She had believed, truly believed, that patience was the same as strength, that endurance was the same as dignity, that if she just kept going, just kept working, just kept being invisible, the world would eventually see her and reward her for her grace. But the world does not work that way. Not this world, not that office, and not those people. Standing in that corridor with her husband's hand warm and steady on the back of her neck and the rain falling harder against the glass and the sound of her own heartbeat finally slowing back to something human, she understood something she had been refusing to understand for a very long time. Silence is not always strength. Sometimes it is the cage you build around yourself and then hand the key to your tormentors. And she was done being caged. Julian looked at her. She looked at him. And between them, in that look, was an entire conversation that did not need a single word. What came next would change everything. For her, for them, For every person in that building who had looked away when they should have spoken up, who had laughed when they should have been ashamed, who had mistaken her quietness for weakness and her kindness for submission. Monday was coming, and when it arrived, they would learn the truth. And it was only the beginning. The stairwell door closed behind them with a sound like a verdict, heavy, final, the kind of sound that separates what came before from what comes next. Vivienne leaned against the cold metal surface and closed her eyes. The fluorescent light above them hummed faintly, casting everything in a pale blue wash that made the concrete walls look like the inside of a hospital. The air smelled like nothing. Not coffee, not perfume, not ambition, just cold, recycled nothing. And for the first time all day, that emptiness felt like mercy. Julian stood across from her, leaning against the opposite wall with his arms loosely crossed. His overcoat was half unbuttoned, the collar still damp from the drizzle outside. He had not said a word since she walked out of those glass doors. He did not need to. His presence alone said everything. I am here, I have been here, I will not leave. He studied her face the way he always did when she was hurting, not with pity. Never pity. Julian Okafor did not pity his wife. He respected her too much for that. He looked at her with recognition, the kind of gaze that says, I see exactly what this is costing you, and I will not insult you by pretending it is less than it is. His eyes moved down to her sleeve. The cherry soda had dried into a dark red stain that clung to the olive fabric like a wound. The cardigan was ruined. But it was not the cardigan he was looking at. It was the way her hand trembled when she reached up to push a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Again, he said quietly. It was not a question. It was a confirmation. Vivienne nodded. She pressed her lips together and stared at the ceiling. She did not want to cry. Not here. Not in a stairwell that smelled like concrete and resignation. But there was something about Julian. There had always been something about Julian. The way he looked at her made it impossible to pretend she was fine when she was falling apart. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and withdrew a handkerchief. Not paper, not disposable, real cloth. Midnight blue with a monogram J.O. stitched in silver thread in the corner. He had carried one every day for as long as she had known him. It was one of the first things she had noticed about him, back when they were strangers at a university fundraiser, and she had spilled wine on her wrist, and he had appeared beside her without a word, and handed her this same kind of handkerchief, and smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. She almost laughed. Almost. Of course you still carry one of those. Of course, he said, and he stepped forward and pressed it gently against the stain on her arm, not wiping, not scrubbing, just holding it there, as if the gesture itself mattered more than the result. They stood like that for a long moment, just the two of them in a gray stairwell that no one else in the building ever used. The hum of the fluorescent light, the distant sound of rain against the windows one floor above, the echo of their breathing settling into the same rhythm, the way it always did when they were alone together. Vivienne took the handkerchief from his hand. It is not that bad, she said. She did not believe it. He did not believe it either. But he let her say it because he understood that sometimes people need to hear their own lies before they are ready for the truth. Julian straightened. His voice was low but edged with something that had been sharpening for months. Vivienne, if someone threw a drink at an employee in any one of my companies, they would be escorted out of the building before the liquid hit the floor. There would be no conversation, no second chance, no investigation. They would simply be gone. It is not your company, she replied gently. It is my fight, my choice, my ground. I know. His jaw clenched so tightly she could see the muscles shift beneath his skin. But I have been patient, Vivienne. I have been patient for 2 years. I have watched you come home with that look on your face, the one you think I do not see. I have listened to you cry in the shower when you think the water is loud enough to cover it. I have held you at 3 in the morning when you wake up with your heart racing, because your body has learned to be afraid of a place where you spend 8 hours a day. He paused. His voice dropped even lower. This is not character building anymore. This is cruelty, and I am done watching. Vivienne turned away from him. She gripped the stairwell railing and looked down the spiraling concrete descent. 5 floors of identical gray steps disappearing into a vanishing point that looked like an answer to a question she had not yet asked. "I just wanted to be normal," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to build something of my own. Something that had nothing to do with your name or your money or your world. I wanted to walk into a room and be respected for my mind, not feared because of my husband. I wanted to earn it, Julian, every bit of it, on my own terms." He was quiet for a beat. Then he said something she did not expect. "You have done more with that restraint than I have done with $1 billion. She turned back to him. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. "Do not say that like it is impressive. You fund climate research with pocket change. You built a housing initiative from scratch. You sit on ethics boards that actually change policy." "I am not comparing achievements," he said. "I am telling you that what you have endured in that office, with nothing but your own composure and your own two hands, is the most courageous thing I have ever witnessed. And I am not going to let them take one more day from you." She exhaled slowly. Her fingers tightened around the railing. "It is not about respect anymore," she said. "They will never give it. They do not know how. I tried to stay quiet. I tried to keep my head down. I thought if I just worked harder, delivered more, stayed out of their way, eventually they would see me. But it just got worse. Every week. Every day, I think." She stopped. She pressed her hand against her chest, as if trying to hold something in. "I think they want me to quit." Julian's eyes sharpened. The warmth left them for a moment, replaced by something precise and dangerous. The look of a man who had built an empire, not by being kind, but by being exact. "Then they have made a very serious mistake," he said. A silence stretched between them, heavy, loaded, full of a decision that both of them had been circling for months and neither of them had been willing to land on. Until now. Vivian inhaled. "Julian." He was already pulling out his phone. "Who are you calling?" "Conrad. I want full acquisition numbers on my desk by noon." "Acquisition?" She blinked. "I have already looked into it," he said, his thumb moving across the screen with the practiced ease of a man who made decisions worth millions before breakfast. "Privately. Quietly. Pinnacle is held by a private equity consortium with 3 managing partners and a governance structure I can dismantle in 2 phone calls. The 3rd call is a courtesy. I held back because you asked me to. But you never asked me to stand here and watch them pour soda on you and laugh." Vivian stepped forward and placed her hand over his phone. Her fingers pressed against the screen, stopping the call before it connected. His eyes met hers. "I do not need you to save me," she said. Her voice was shaking, but beneath the tremor there was something solid, something that had not been there an hour ago. "I need you to stand beside me, just this once. Let me choose what happens next." Julian looked at her for a long time. His thumb hovered over the screen. His jaw was tight. His breathing was controlled in that way it got, when he was restraining himself from doing exactly what every instinct in his body was telling him to do. Then he lowered the phone. "Okay." The word did not sound like surrender. It sounded like trust. The kind of trust that costs something. The kind that only exists between 2 people who have learned, over years and through fire, that love is not about fixing. It is about standing still when every muscle in your body wants to move. Vivian reached into her bag and pulled out the broken thermos. She held it in both hands. The cracked glass shifted inside the dented steel. She looked at it the way you look at something that used to mean safety and now means something else entirely. "Something broke today," she said. Julian looked at the thermos, then at her. "But something else started," she said. "I can feel it, right here." She pressed her hand to her sternum. Small, but real, like a match that just caught. Julian nodded. He did not try to name it. He did not try to shape it, or direct it, or take credit for it. He simply witnessed it. And sometimes, witnessing is the most powerful thing another person can do. "Come home with me," he said, "just for the weekend. No spreadsheets, no inbox, no Pinnacle, just us." She hesitated. Then she nodded. They walked out into the gray drizzle together. The rain hit their faces like cold fingertips. Julian opened the car door for her, and as she slid into the passenger seat, Vivian caught her own reflection in the side mirror. Her face was tired. Her cardigan was stained. Her eyes were red at the edges. But there was something else there, too, something new, a sharpness in her gaze that had not been there that morning. A quiet intensity that looked less like pain and more like purpose. The engine started. The wipers began their slow rhythm across the glass. And as the city shrank behind them, Vivian made a decision she did not say out loud. She was going back on Monday. And when she did, she was not going back as the woman they thought she was. The drive took 41 minutes. Neither of them spoke. The rain thickened and thinned in waves, drumming against the roof of the car like a pulse. The city gave way to suburbs, then to trees, then to the long, dark stretch of road that ran along the edge of the lake. Their home appeared through the mist like something out of a dream. It was a modernist structure of dark timber and floor-to-ceiling glass, set back from the water's edge on a gentle slope of wild grass. Warm light poured from every window, turning the rain into gold where it caught the glow. The lake stretched out behind it, black and still, reflecting nothing but the low gray sky. Vivian stepped through the front door and let her bag slide off her shoulder. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud, and she left it there. She did not pick it up. She did not organize it. She just let it fall. Julian closed the door behind them. He hung his coat. He loosened his collar. And he followed her into the kitchen without speaking, because he understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is be present without being loud. She opened the cupboard and pulled down a ceramic mug. Not the thermos. The mug. The one Julian had bought the week they moved in from a small pottery shop near the lake. It was simple. Cream-colored. Slightly uneven at the rim where the artisan's hand had wavered. It had no inscription. No quote. No handwriting. It was just a mug. But it felt like the beginning of something because it was the first thing they had chosen for this house together. She filled the kettle, she set it on the stove, and then she stopped. Her hand rested on the counter, and she stared at her reflection in the dark window above the sink. The rain distorted her face, blurred the edges, made her look like someone she used to know but had not seen in a very long time. I always told myself I could handle it, she said at last. Her voice was so quiet it almost disappeared beneath the sound of the rain. I told myself that staying quiet meant I was strong, that not reacting was a form of power, that if I just kept going, they would get bored and move on. Julian leaned against the counter behind her. He crossed his arms. He did not interrupt. It does take strength, he replied, more than most people will ever understand. But even stone wears down under enough water, she said. She turned to face him. The kettle was forgotten. Her eyes were clear and dry, and devastatingly honest. It is not just today, Julian. It has been building. Every morning I walk into that building, I become less. Every whisper, every look, every time someone laughs in a way that I know is about me. Every time I sit in a meeting and say something smart and watch someone else get the credit. Every time I eat my lunch alone in the break room and pretend I cannot hear what they are saying in the hallway, I disappear. A little more each day, until there is almost nothing left. He moved toward her, not fast, not urgently, with the slow, deliberate care of a man approaching something fragile and sacred. Then let us make you visible again, he said. She reached into her bag, which was still slumped on the floor by the door, and pulled out the broken thermos. She placed it on the counter between them. The cracked glass caught the kitchen light and threw tiny fractured rainbows across the marble. This broke today, she said. But the breaking started long before that. I thought I needed to earn their respect, without your name hanging over me. I thought that was the brave thing to do. The right thing. But I was wrong. I was not earning anything, Julian. I was not building anything. I was just surviving, and surviving is not the same as living. Julian's jaw tightened, his hands, resting on the counter, curled slightly into fists and then released. I hate what they have done to you, he said. I hate what I have done to myself, she replied. I let them. I gave them permission every single day by staying silent. I thought my silence was dignity, but it was not. It was just fear with better posture. He shook his head slowly. You did what you thought you had to. You chose the harder road. You always choose the harder road, Vivienne. That is who you are. She looked at the broken thermos on the counter. Then she looked at him. You know what the worst part is? I was not even surprised. When she threw that can at me, I did not think, how dare she. I thought, there it is. I had been waiting for it, bracing for it, every single morning for weeks. I would sit at my desk, and my body would be tight and my chest would be shallow, and I would be scanning the room the way you scan a dark street at night. That is not strength, Julian. That is not resilience. That is a woman who has been trained to expect violence from the people she works with. That is fear in a cardigan. Julian took a step toward her. He reached out and placed both hands on her shoulders, gently, firmly, like he was anchoring her to the present moment. "And yet you stayed," he said. "Until today," she whispered, "until I broke, and you were standing there, waiting, like you always are." He pulled her close. She let him. And this time, finally, her body softened. The rigidity that had been holding her upright all day, all week, all year, it cracked. Not dramatically, not with a sob or a collapse. Just a slow, quiet releasing of everything she had been carrying alone. They stood in their kitchen in their home in the warm light with the rain falling outside and the broken thermos on the counter between them, and they held each other the way two people do when they have been through something that words cannot fully reach. After a long time, Julian spoke again. His voice was calm now, measured. "I sent the video to a lawyer," he said, "not to file yet, just to have it reviewed, in case you want to move forward." Vivian pulled back slightly. "What video?" "Sloane's video, the one she posted to the company's internal channel. Someone forwarded it to me Thursday night. I have the original file and the metadata." Vivian stared at him. "And I made one other call," he continued. "Your old professor, Dr. Adelaide Fairbanks. She is building a consulting team for a new digital ethics initiative, backed by 3 of the largest tech firms on the West Coast. She asked about you last year, Vivian. She remembered your thesis. She remembered your name. She said, and I am quoting directly, that woman's mind is wasted anywhere that does not challenge it." Vivian blinked. "You did not." "I did not give her your number," he said, "but I can. Tonight. Tomorrow. Whenever you say the word." She stood there, in the middle of her own kitchen, with her stained cardigan and her tired eyes, and her husband standing in front of her, offering her 2 doors. 2 futures. 2 versions of what Monday could look like. "Or," he said, more softly now, "you can go back in on Monday and show them who they have really been sitting next to for 2 years. Let them choke on their own surprise." Vivian's lips twitched. "I do not want revenge," she murmured. "Good," Julian said, "because this is not revenge, this is reclamation. There is a difference. Revenge is about making them suffer. Reclamation is about taking back what is yours." He reached out and gently touched her stained sleeve. "Let them see who you are, Vivian, not who you have been pretending to be in order to survive them." She looked up at him. Her heart was hammering now, not from fear, not from anger, from something sharper and cleaner than both. Clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes after you have been broken open, and the light finally gets in. "Julian." "Yes, I want to go back Monday." His smile returned. "Slow, solid, like sunrise over the lake. Then we will go back Monday." "No," she said. She stepped forward and closed the space between them until she could feel his heartbeat against her own. "I will go back alone." He held her gaze. He nodded slowly. And he let go. That weekend, Vivian rested. She slept late on Saturday for the first time in months. She walked barefoot along the edge of the lake in the cold morning air. She sat in Julian's study and wrote letters by hand on cream-colored stationery. She did not watch television. She did not check her email. She did not think about spreadsheets or data models or client briefs. She thought about who she had been and who she was becoming. Sunday night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror after a long shower. The steam had cleared. Her reflection was sharp. She looked at herself the way she had not looked at herself in years, not critically, not with shame, just honestly. And what she saw surprised her. Not a broken woman, not a victim, not even a survivor. A woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side still standing, still breathing, still kind. And now, finally, ready to stop hiding. Monday arrived dressed in pale gold. The storm had passed sometime during the night, leaving the sky scrubbed clean and the lake glittering with the kind of early morning light that makes everything look like a second chance. Birds called from the trees along the shore. The air smelled like wet earth and new beginnings. Vivienne stood in front of the tall mirror in their bedroom, fastening the last button on a cream silk blouse. Her cardigan, the olive one, cleaned and stitched carefully at the shoulder where the soda stain had bled through the fabric, lay folded on the bed beside her. She looked at it for a long moment, then she turned away. She would not be wearing it today. Instead, she chose a tailored charcoal blazer. It was not designer. It was not expensive. But it fit her perfectly, and there was something in the way it sat on her shoulders that changed the geometry of her entire silhouette. Her hair was pinned in a sleek twist. Her earrings were small gold hoops. Her shoes had a low heel, practical but pointed. There was no armor in her outfit, no costume, no performance. Just precision. Just intention. Just a woman who had finally decided to take up exactly the amount of space she deserved. Julian watched her from the bedroom doorway with his coffee in his hand. He did not speak. He knew what this moment was. This was not a woman getting dressed for work. This was a woman getting dressed for the rest of her life. Before she left, she crossed the room and picked up the broken thermos from the nightstand where it had sat all weekend. She placed it gently in Julian's free hand and closed his fingers around it. "I will not need this anymore," she said. He looked at the thermos. He looked at her. And then he kissed her forehead with the tenderness of a man who understood that the bravest thing he could do in that moment was let her walk out the door without him. She did not look back. Pinnacle Brand Group buzzed with the same hollow energy it always had on a Monday morning. The elevator chimed. The coffee machine hissed. The bullpen hummed with the low-frequency noise of people performing their relevance for each other. Gabrielle was already at her desk, nails freshly lacquered a deep, violent burgundy, scrolling through her phone with the lazy confidence of a woman who had never once doubted her right to be in any room she entered. Derek was recounting his weekend to anyone within earshot, his voice pitched to carry maximum performance per sentence. Sloane leaned against the coffee bar, filming her own reflection in the chrome surface of the espresso machine. None of them had expected Vivienne to come back. Not after Friday. Not after the spectacle. Over the weekend, the group chat had circulated the video like a trophy. Sloane had posted it with a laughing emoji and the caption, "Office survival of the fittest." Gabrielle had replied with 3 fire emojis and the words, "Natural selection." Derek had simply written, "She is done." They were wrong. The glass doors opened, and Vivienne walked through them without hesitation. Her heels struck the marble floor in a rhythm that was new, steady, even, unhurried, like a metronome set to a tempo that belonged entirely to her. The receptionist looked up from his screen and blinked. "Morning, Vivienne. You are early." "I know," she said, and she paused for exactly 1 second, just long enough to meet his eyes with a gaze that made him sit up slightly straighter in his chair. Then she moved on. Gabrielle noticed her next. Her eyes narrowed, not in guilt, not in shame, in suspicion. Something was different, and she could feel it the way animals feel a change in the weather. Something in the air had shifted, and she did not know what it was, and that unsettled her more than she would ever admit. Sloane leaned toward Derek and whispered something behind a manicured hand. Derek chuckled. But the chuckle was shorter than usual, thinner, as if even he could sense that the rules of the game had changed overnight. Vivienne sat at her desk. She powered on her monitor. She typed in her password. She opened her inbox. And there it was, flagged urgent, from the Legal Affairs Division of Pinnacle Holdings Incorporated. Subject line, internal HR investigation. Immediate staff response required. She opened it. She read every line. Slowly, carefully, the way she read data. The way she read everything. Looking for patterns, for meaning, for the architecture beneath the words. And then she allowed herself the smallest smile. Not wide, not triumphant, just the faintest lift of the corner of her lips. the kind of smile that says, "It has begun." Across the floor, screens began to light up, one by one. Gabrielle's monitor flashed with a notification. Then Derek's. Then Sloane's. One by one, their faces shifted. Confusion first, then recognition. Then something cold and crawling that started in their stomachs and spread outward through their chests and into their throats. Fear. Sloane jolted upright so fast she knocked her iced coffee across her desk. The cup hit the floor and exploded in a splash of brown liquid and ice. Nobody laughed. Derek leaned back in his chair and tried to force a chuckle, but the sound came out strangled and wrong, like a cough pretending to be casual. Gabrielle clicked her mouse, then clicked again, then again, as if repetition could undo what was already done. It could not. Vivienne rose from her chair. She stood at her full height. She smoothed her blazer, and she looked directly at the three of them. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Her voice was calm, measured. The kind of calm that is more frightening than any shout because it means the person speaking has already made every decision they need to make. Gabrielle spun around. Her voice was sharp, but there was a crack in it now, a fracture that had not been there on Friday. "What did you do?" "I submitted the footage," Vivienne replied. "All of it. The incident on Friday. The pattern of harassment over the past 6 months. The internal social media posts. The stolen work product." She paused. "Including your video, Sloane." Sloane's face lost its color so completely she looked like a photograph that had been left in the sun. "That is not, you cannot, that was a private." "You posted it on the company's internal channel," Vivienne said, with a caption, and a laughing emoji. "There is nothing private about that." Derek stepped forward. His hands were raised slightly, palms out, the universal gesture of a man trying to minimize a situation he can feel slipping out of his control. "Come on, Vivienne. Let us not blow this out of proportion. It was not personal. We were just messing around." Vivienne's gaze met his. Steady, still. The gaze of a woman who had spent 2 years watching people lie to her face and had finally stopped pretending she could not tell the difference. "You recorded me. You kicked my chair. You broke my husband's thermos. You laughed while I cleaned soda off my own work. You stole a project I spent 3 weeks building and put your colleague's name on it." She paused. "I was going to let it go. All of it. Every single moment. I was going to absorb it the way I have absorbed everything else in this building for 2 years." She took one step forward. "I am not anymore." And then it happened. The second notification. Every screen on the floor lit up simultaneously. A company-wide alert from Pinnacle Holdings corporate headquarters. The subject line was 4 words long, and those 4 words traveled through the office like a shockwave. Change of controlling ownership. A hush fell over the entire floor, not just the bullpen, the entire floor. Someone in accounting gasped. The CEO's office door cracked open an inch and then slammed shut as his assistant scrambled to make a phone call. The operations manager stopped mid-sentence in a conversation she would never finish. Even the coffee machine seemed to go quiet. Gabrielle's eyes darted across her screen. Her mouth moved slightly as she read the words. Then she looked up at Vivienne. "What is this?" she said. Her voice was not sharp anymore. It was thin, stretched, the voice of someone standing on ground that has just started to shake. Vivienne tilted her head. The gesture was so subtle, so controlled, that it carried more weight than any dramatic reveal ever could. "Okafor," she said simply, "as in Julian Okafor. As in the man you called my imaginary rich boyfriend in front of the entire office last month." She paused. "He is not imaginary. He is not a boyfriend. He is my husband. And as of 7:45 this morning, he holds a controlling share in Pinnacle Brand Group." The silence that followed was unlike anything that office had ever experienced. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of reckoning. The silence of a room full of people suddenly understanding that the ground beneath them had shifted and the person they had spent 2 years stepping on was now standing above them. Sloane's voice cracked through the stillness. It was barely a whisper. "You had a billionaire husband this entire time." Vivienne turned to her, and for a moment, just a moment, her expression softened. Not with forgiveness, Not yet. But with something close to sadness. I had every right to earn my place on my own terms, she said. I wanted to be seen for my work, for my mind, for what I could contribute, not for who I married, she paused. But you never gave me that chance. You decided I did not belong the moment I did not look like you, the moment my shoes were not expensive enough, the moment my lunch came in a container instead of a delivery bag. You looked at me and you saw nothing, and you treated me accordingly. Derek backed away from his desk. His hands were in his pockets now, his jaw was slack. This is insane, he murmured. This is absolutely insane. What is insane? Said a new voice from behind them, deep and unhurried and carrying the kind of authority that does not need volume to fill a room, is that any of you believe she was the weakest person in this building. They turned, every single one of them. Julian Okafor stood at the entrance to the bullpen, no overcoat, no tie, just a dark fitted shirt and charcoal trousers, and the kind of presence that rearranged the energy of any room he walked into. He was not performing power. He was not projecting it. He simply carried it the way some people carry height or silence. It was part of him. He walked forward slowly, past the stunned faces, past the frozen keyboards, past the desks where people who had laughed and whispered and filmed and stolen and said nothing were now sitting very, very still. He stopped beside Vivienne. She did not look at him. She did not need to. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. I am not here to make threats, Julian said. His voice filled the room the way sunlight fills a window, calmly, completely. I am here to inform you that effective immediately, all employees involved in the incidents of last Friday and the preceding months will be suspended without pay, pending a full investigation by both internal HR and an independent review board. Gabrielle's composure finally shattered. This is ridiculous. You cannot just walk into this office and start firing people. You do not even work here. Julian looked at her. He did not raise his voice. He did not change his expression. He simply looked at her with the steady, unblinking gaze of a man who had spent 30 years sitting across from people far more powerful than Gabrielle Fontaine and had never once flinched. Miss Fontaine, he said, you are no longer speaking to a colleague's spouse. You are speaking to the majority stakeholder of this company. I can, and I will. Sloane grabbed for her bag with trembling hands. Leave the laptop, Vivienne said softly, and the badge. Sloane froze. She looked at Vivienne, then at Julian, then at the security team that had appeared, quietly and without announcement at the entrance to the floor. One by one they were escorted out. Gabrielle first, then Derek, then Sloane. Each of them walked past the chrome logo on the wall, past the reception desk, past the revolving doors that Vivienne had walked through every morning for 2 years with her head down and her heart tight. They did not look back, and nobody laughed. If this moment just gave you chills, drop a fire emoji in the comments right now. Share this video with someone who has ever been treated like they were invisible, and if you have not already, hit that subscribe button. We are almost at the end of this story, and what comes next is going to stay with you for a long time. By 11 o'clock that morning, the knock came. 3 soft taps on the glass wall of her cubicle. It was Nadine Alvarez, Senior VP of Strategy, a woman who had been at Pinnacle for 12 years and had spoken to Vivienne exactly once before to ask her to resend a data file. She stood in the corridor now, with a black leather folder pressed against her chest and an expression on her face that sat somewhere between respect and discomfort. Ms. Okafor, she said. The formality was stiff, like a coat that did not quite fit. The executive board would like to speak with you. 15 minutes. Conference room 9. Vivienne nodded. I will be there. Nadine hesitated. Then she nodded and walked away without another word. Conference room 9 was on the top floor. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the city skyline in a panoramic sweep that made everything below look small and impermanent. The board members sat in a semicircle around a long walnut table, coffee cups steaming, tablets glowing. Faces arranged in the particular expression of people who have recently discovered they were wrong about something important and are now trying to figure out how to say so without losing dignity. Julian was not in the room. His absence was deliberate. This was not his moment. this was hers. The interim CEO, a man named Russell Pratt with silver-streaked hair and careful measured eyes, folded his hands on the table and looked at her directly. "Ms. Okafor," he began, "on behalf of the executive board, I want to express our sincerest regret for what took place in this building. I have personally reviewed the footage. All of it. What happened to you was not a workplace disagreement. It was sustained harassment. And the failure of this organization to identify it, to address it, to protect you from it, is something I take personally." "I appreciate that," Vivian said. She did not waver. She did not soften for his comfort. She simply received his words the way she received data. With attention, with analysis, without sentiment. "I assume legal proceedings are underway," she said. "They are. But that is not why we have called you here." Vivian tilted her head slightly. She already knew what was coming. She could feel it the way she felt patterns in data. The shape of the conversation. The trajectory of the variables. The inevitable conclusion. "Effective immediately," Pratt said, "we would like to formally offer you the position of Director of Data Intelligence. You will oversee the analytics department, restructure our data strategy from the ground up, and report directly to executive leadership. Your compensation package will reflect the scope and significance of the role." He pushed a leather-bound folder across the table. It landed in front of her with a soft, decisive sound. Vivian opened it. She read every page. Title, salary, equity, authority, resources. Everything she had spent 2 years earning in silence, documented in black ink on heavy paper. The room waited. "I will accept," she said, "on one condition." Pratt raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "I want to establish an internal task force dedicated to workplace culture, ethical accountability, and anonymous reporting. Not a quarterly seminar. Not a slide deck on a Monday morning. A real, functioning body with oversight authority and the power to act. Something that protects people. Not just people like me, Mr. Pratt. The people who cannot walk into this room and make demands. The ones who do not have a Julian Okafor waiting in the hallway." A silence filled the room. The board members exchanged glances. "That is not standard," Pratt said. Vivian smiled, for the first time that day. A real smile, small but real. "Exactly," she said. Another pause. Pratt leaned back. He looked at the board. He looked at her. Then he nodded. "Done." That afternoon, Vivian stood in front of her new office. Glass-paneled, northeast corner. Sunlight pouring across a walnut desk that still smelled faintly of furniture polish. On the shelf behind it, a row of corporate awards that no one in this building had ever earned quite the way she had. She set down her bag. She placed a framed photograph of her mother beside a vase of white orchids that had been arranged on the desk before she arrived. Tucked beneath the vase was a small folded note. "Julian's handwriting. For the storm you survived, and the one you now command, J." She sat in her chair. She opened her laptop. And for one quiet moment, she caught her own reflection in the dark glass of the screen before it powered on. She looked like herself, only different. Not taller, not louder, not harder, just fully present. Like a woman who had finally stopped trying to disappear. Over the weekend, she had written letters, each one by hand, each one on cream-colored stationery, each one deliberate. One to Amy, the HR intern, who had come to Vivian's office the following week with shaking hands and wet eyes and whispered, "I am sorry I did not say anything that day. I was scared." Vivian had taken her hands and said, "I know, I was scared too. That is why this matters." One to Nadine Alvarez, for being the first person on the leadership team to look her in the eye and speak to her with respect. One to Russell Pratt, holding him to his word. The task force was formally established the following month. It was called the Okafor Initiative. And 3 more. Gabrielle, Derek, Sloan. She had thought about those letters for a long time. She had drafted them and rewritten them and torn them up and started again. There were no lectures in the final versions. No sermons. No righteous paragraphs designed to make herself feel superior. Just a few lines each. Honest. Measured. Clean. Gabrielle's letter, was the hardest to write and the simplest to read. Gabrielle, I forgive you, not because you have earned it, because I have. V. She folded the letters. She placed them in a cloth envelope. She set the envelope in her outgoing tray, let them read the truth on paper, without an audience, without a camera, without the armor of laughter or the shield of a group chat. Let the weight of what they did sit quietly beside their morning coffee and stay. Later that afternoon, Vivienne stood at the center of the glass atrium on the ground floor. Employees gathered along the balcony railings on the floors above. The usual noise of the building, the phones and the heels and the performance, had gone quiet. Phones were lowered. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The building itself seemed to lean in. She held a microphone. She cleared her throat, not loudly, but firmly. The sound carried. I have worked in this building for 2 years, she began. Her voice was steady, clear, the voice of a woman who had found something inside herself that could not be taken. For the first time, I feel like I have been seen. Every eye was on her, not with pity, not with curiosity, with respect, the earned kind, the kind that cannot be demanded or performed or bought, the kind that only comes when someone has walked through something real and come out the other side still standing. Change does not start with policy, she continued. It does not start with memos or task forces or investigations, although those things matter. Change starts with one person deciding to see another person. Really see them. Not their clothes, not their title, not their lunch. Them. It starts with accountability, with empathy, and, yes, with grace, especially for those who have not yet learned how to ask for it. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was not awkward. It was the kind of silence that happens when truth enters a room and everyone in it recognizes it at the same time. And then came the applause. Not the polite, obligatory kind. Not the kind that follows a quarterly earnings report or a motivational speaker's closing line. This was different. This came from somewhere lower, somewhere deeper. The kind of applause that rises from the chest and moves through the hands and does not stop because the person clapping does not want it to. Vivienne did not smile for them. She smiled for herself. That night, back at the lake house, she stood barefoot on the wooden deck, a mug of ginger tea in her hand, Julian's arm around her waist. The moon hung low over the water, laying ribbons of silver across the surface that shifted and reformed with every breath of wind. "You burned the whole place down," Julian said softly. There was admiration in his voice, and something else, relief. The relief of a man who had watched the woman he loved carry something impossibly heavy for far too long and had finally seen her set it down. "No," Vivienne replied. She rested her head against his shoulder. The warmth of him, the steadiness, the quiet, unwavering presence that had been her anchor through every storm she had ever faced. "I did not burn anything down. I just opened the windows and let the storm blow through." He chuckled. "Grace and thunder." She nodded. "Always both." The wind moved across the lake. The water rippled. The trees along the shore swayed in a rhythm that was older than the house, older than the city, older than any of the small, brittle cruelties that people build inside glass towers and mistake for power. And in that wind, in that silence, in that silver light falling across the water like a benediction, Vivienne Okafor felt what she had not felt in a very, very long time. Not power, not pride, not victory. Peace. The deep, bone-level peace of a woman who had survived a storm she did not deserve, who had walked through fire and come out the other side not harder, but clearer, not louder, but truer. A woman who had been invisible and had chosen, finally, to let herself be seen. A storm survived, a woman reborn. We have come to the end of the story, family. I hope it touched something in you. If this story moved you, leave a like, leave a comment. Tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis so you never miss a story. And remember, no matter how quiet the world tries to make you, your voice matters. Your presence matters. You matter. Until next time.